In a quiet, forgotten quarter of Savannah, Georgia, nestled between two weathered stone buildings that had stood sentinel for centuries, there was a narrow alleyway few noticed. Its stones, worn smooth by countless footsteps, carried the scent of old oak mingled with salt from the nearby river. The air hung heavy with history, rain, and a hint of moss. At the alley's end stood a wrought iron gate, blackened by rust but oddly inviting under the silver glow of the moon. Few ever passed that way. Fewer still cared to look beyond the gate. And almost no one knew what came alive when the clock's hands aligned at midnight. Except for two. Eliot Marrow, a professor of ancient literature at Savannah State University, was a man wrapped in old-world charm. His tweed jacket, complete with elbow patches worn soft from years of thought and teaching, hung on his broad shoulders like armor against the mundanity of daily life. A silver pocket watch, its face scratched yet gleaming faintly, nestled in his vest pocket, tethering him to a past where time was sacred and measured. Clutched always in his worn satchel was a leather-bound journal, heavy with handwritten notes, reflections, and half-finished poems, ink-stained and cherished like a talisman. Eliot believed deeply in solitude, the sacred rhythm of ink on paper, the slow unfurling of thought in silence. For him, life was a tapestry woven in quiet moments, where stories breathed and grew. Isabel Crane lived above a dusty antique bookshop in a cramped third-floor apartment, where the floorboards creaked secrets with every step. By day, she was a ghostwriter, lending her voice to others' stories, her own whispered beneath the surface. By night, she was a poet, a secret alchemist of words, weaving verses from moonlight and shadows. She believed in the unseen, the magic that thrummed beneath the surface of the ordinary, in stories that lingered unsaid, in the fragile beauty of half-remembered dreams. Isabel's heart was a garden of unspoken truths, and books were the blossoms she tended carefully. Neither knew the other existed. Yet each night, precisely at midnight, they found themselves drawn to the same impossible place, the Twilight Library. A hidden sanctuary that slipped into being only between the strokes of 12 and 1, nestled in that forgotten alleyway. The library defied reason. Its shelves stretched endlessly, bending space and time, holding worlds within worlds. Books whispered softly among themselves, their leather bindings alive with stories that fluttered like quiet wings. The air was rich with the scent of aged parchment, cedarwood, and a faint trace of something elusive, perhaps the scent of hope itself. The library's rule was simple: one visitor at a time, one solitary communion with literature. Until the night when everything changed. Eliot arrived early, the library silent except for the flicker of candlelight. A single book lay open on the central oak table, Homer's The Odyssey, its pages yellowed and inviting. As he reached to touch the worn spine, a second hand, slender and pale, touched the other side of the page. Startled, Eliot looked up. Across from him stood a woman wrapped in a flowing deep green cloak. "Isabel, I didn't expect anyone else here," she said softly, eyes wide with surprise and wonder. "Nor did I," Eliot replied, a smile breaking the reserve he usually wore like a shield. "Perhaps we could share the story," she offered, a hopeful edge in her voice. They did. Without exchanging names, they settled into two deep velvet armchairs near the fireplace, where embers glowed faintly and cast dancing shadows on the walls. Each held one side of the book, their fingers brushing occasionally as they turned the fragile pages. Silence wrapped around them like a shared secret, only broken by the crackling fire and the rustling of leaves outside the window. Night after night, the twilight library became their refuge, a world apart where two strangers bound by unspoken understanding found solace in shared tales. Sometimes poetry, sometimes drama, once a forgotten manuscript with words neither had heard before. They spoke in fragments, a line here, a whisper there. "That verse about the sea's sorrow," Isabel murmured one evening. Eliot nodded thoughtfully. "It reminds me of lost journeys. Not just across oceans, but through the heart." Often words were unnecessary. Their presence spoke volumes. Glances, quiet smiles, the shared rhythm of turning pages binding them closer. Eliot began to live for those nights, waiting through the day with a quiet ache in his chest. He found himself gazing at stars, as if they might reveal a hint of that other world, no longer measuring time by dates but by the books they had read. When Isabel missed a night, he lingered in the library until the clock forced him out, the book untouched and cold. The next night she returned, pale and tired. "A migraine," she said softly. "I couldn't move." He only nodded, but that night, he brought her a slim volume of poems she'd once whispered she loved. She took it from his hands, and their fingers brushed, light, unintentional but charged. Neither spoke, but the silence was thick with meaning. One stormy night, thunder rolled across Savannah, and rain lashed at the streets like a wild song. Eliot stood at the gate, drenched but unwavering. Inside, Isabel was already waiting, her hair damp, eyes bright with something fierce. "You came," she breathed. "So did you," he replied, shaking water from his coat. The rain drummed a steady rhythm as they read a book of sonnets by the fire. Eliot caught her watching him from behind the page, her gaze lingering like a soft flame. Outside the library, their lives moved in parallel. Isabel sitting by a cafe window as Eliot passed with his umbrella, him browsing aisles in the market while she reached for tea nearby. Their worlds brushed but never collided, until the story began to write itself. One evening, Isabel arrived early. She wandered the aisles, fingers trailing over leather spines, heart pounding with a rhythm she no longer understood. She slipped a poem into a worn Neruda collection, folded between the pages like a secret. That night, Eliot came with nerves unfamiliar to him, not finding her in the reading nook. He searched until he discovered the poem. He unfolded it slowly, reading her words, soft, aching, a mirror to his own hidden longings. When she stepped from the shadows, their eyes met in a silent confession. "You found it," she whispered. He nodded, emotion thick in his throat. They chose an anthology of modern love letters, reading aloud sometimes, sometimes in silence, always side by side. Outside, the world spun unaware of the magic glowing between two souls in a secret place where time bent to love's will. They began leaving notes inside books for each other, lines of poetry, memories, and questions like seeds sown between pages. A favorite became a worn collection of Emily Dickinson poems. Each time it changed locations on the shelves, one of them would find it, feel their pulse quicken. Isabel began dreaming of Eliot, not as shadows or mist, but as a man with a smile that warmed her nights and a voice that echoed through her thoughts. Her fingers itched to write. She began a novel. Not a client's story, not a ghosted tale, but her own. The Twilight Library, their meetings, the books, the ache and hope, the unknown. She poured her heart into it, and when finished, her editor gasped. "It's unlike anything I've read. Quiet and beautiful, aching in all the right places. We're publishing this immediately." Meanwhile, Eliot wandered the aisles of Bluebird Books, restless and searching for something he couldn't name. Then a simple cover caught his eye. A clock at midnight, two shadows framed by light. He froze. The title, The Twilight Library. He bought it, went home, read through the night, heart pounding. Every page unfolded like memory. Their conversations, silences, the way her eyes lingered on poetry, how she adjusted her cloak before sitting. At the end he trembled. The last lines read, "To the one who always turned the page with me. If you're reading this, come find me where the books breathe. No name, no address, just the place." He ran through Savannah's sleeping streets, down the alley. The gate was open, the lantern burning brighter than ever. And there she stood, waiting. Isabel held the book close to her chest, breath catching when their eyes met. For a long moment neither moved. Then he stepped forward. "I read every word," he said. And everyone felt like home. The silence was heavy, not with doubt, but the weight of everything unspoken. She reached for his hand. He took it. Around them the books seemed to sigh. Pages fluttered. The fire blazed to life. That night, the Twilight Library let them stay as long as they wished. They brought blankets and tea, eventually bringing themselves in daylight. One morning, as dawn painted the sky soft pink, they stood outside the fading library. They didn't say goodbye. They said, "See you tonight." Months passed. Seasons turned. Isabel's novel found modest success, but it was the nights that mattered most. Eliot returned to his lectures, but always they met. Each time with a new book, a new story to share. They never missed a night. One evening, much later, Isabel placed a ring in the spine of a book and left it open on the table before Eliot arrived. He found it, smiled, and left a note folded inside a sonnet. When she read it, tears fell quietly. That night, the library danced for them. Soft music, violin and cello, played from nowhere. The fire glowed gold. Years passed. The library remained, welcoming others who needed it. But in a quiet corner, two chairs were often occupied, two cups half sipped, and a book left open halfway. Near the hearth, soft laughter lingered. They never needed to own the magic. They only needed to keep showing up. Because in the end, the magic was not in the library itself. It was written in margins, whispered between lines, and shared in warmth between two hearts. Their story was not just between covers. It was between them. Isabel's novel had no sequel. It didn't need one. Every night they returned, they wrote it again.